so what? If you've got any kind of pension fund, that's largely based on shares, so you're going to hit with that as they go down the tubes. So the broad mass of ordinary people are getting nothing of the bailouts. Even the smaller banks aren't getting the bailouts. There's thousands of banks in America are going to go to the wall. The smaller ones, they're being wiped out. There's dozens of financial institutions in Britain are going to be wiped out. And all that will be left is the biggest. The giants are going to get left with it. And they're eating up the little people, and they're eating up the smaller institutions, and in the end you'll get left with these giant capitalist monopolies, rewarded, in fact, for having detonated the system, so it's all chaos. The ones who are big enough to survive it are going to get all the debris and all the assets and all the money of everyone else who's been caught up in the system at the end of it. It's absolutely grotesque. There's no other word for it. So, the question, because everyone understands that, the question I really want to address tonight is, well, what then would the British National Party do about it? How would we get out of this mess? What would we have done different? Well, we wouldn't, for a start, have looked and thought, we have a chicken coop full of chickens, all wanting their mortgages and so on, and all not understanding finance, and you've got some foxes in the shape of bankers who understand precisely what they're doing. I know what we'll do. We'll deregulate it. We'll open the door and we'll let the foxes mix with the chickens, which is what the Tory party started and the Labour Party carried on. A large part of the present mess is simply because over the last 20 or so years, they've deliberately taken away every last restraint on the greed and the corruption and the short-term folly of the banks. So we would bring back all the restraints that there should have been. That's as a very first start. We'd look at the very, very start, where the system begins, as Simon Darby mentioned earlier on. How on earth can you have a system that's based on the idea of perpetual growth? Everything is going to carry on growing. On a planet which is the same size as it was 1,000 years ago and 10 million years ago, where there's no fresh oil being created, no fresh steel, no fresh titanium. Trees will grow if you leave them long enough, if you don't let third worlders herd extra goats on them. Yeah. The fish are there in the sea, as long as you only take out a certain percentage every year. But here in the Black Country, we're further from the sea than pretty much anywhere in Britain. If you go anywhere around our coast, you'll find fishing ports, which are now just tourist attractions, and men breaking up boats because there is no fish left. Because the European Union, courtesy of Blair and Thatcher and Heath and all the rest of the traitors, have allowed in not just European Union countries with seaports, like the French and the Spanish, but also Luxembourg. Luxembourg's got a fishing fleet. It's further from the sea than Birmingham, for God's sake. It's got a fishing fleet in our waters. The Russians have hoovered up everything they possibly can because the European Union have let them. So it's been absolutely devastated. So whether it's, as I say, coal or iron or oil or good farming land or fish, if you've got a population that's ever growing and an economy run by people who give you the lie that this can always keep on growing, what do you expect in the end other than disaster? But they had no choice because the way they create money's worthless. Credit, it's nothing. You can't eat it. It'll only keep you warm for a very brief time if you set light to it. There's no intrinsic value in money whatsoever. It's created out of thin air by the banking system. And they create it out of thin air on the basis that as the economy is going to keep on growing, they create it with a debt attached to it when they create it. And as long as the economy keeps on growing, in ups and downs perhaps, as long as it carries on growing overall, then there's always new money being created which pays off the old debts and the interest that was payable on those debts. So they've got a financial system which can only possibly work if you've got perpetual growth. And if we have perpetual growth, then the seas will be sterile, the land will stop being able to produce decent food, there won't be enough minerals, there won't be enough oil and gas to keep us warm in the winter. It's a mad, wicked system. You know, capitalism is very, very efficient at using up natural resources very quickly for the benefits of this generation and the couple before that. It is, in the long term, a system which just says the earth is ours to loot and rape for us. And what happens to our kids doesn't bother us. What a piece of utter, utter madness. But that's the very core of that system. And we do not hold to the core of that system. As nationalists, we're long-termists. which means we think not just about us or even our children, but our children's children and their children's children and generations yet to come. And the only financial system we want to see, the only economic system we want to see, is one where we're not communists who want to take away private enterprise and the right of someone who works hard to earn lots of money, the right of someone who's a genius and invents something really clever to make lots of money and to pass it on to their children directly, not to our children, because we want our hands in their pocket. We don't believe in that, but we do believe that we have to have the inventive and creative genius of our people harnessed in a way so that it can carry on perpetually and isn't just a short-term, huge binge. And that's what the other parties have allowed. The people of this country and their counterparts around the world have told people this wicked, impossible lie that the economy can grow forever and you needn't worry about resources running out. So we changed that and aim for long-term an economy which is stable. That's enough. Some products in the end people will want. There'll be new inventions, changes and so on. But overall, one industry declining is replaced by another one coming up, where things are stable. Where you make, whether it's fridges and cookers, we're not saying people shouldn't have consumer items like that. Of course they should have them. But isn't it appalling where over the last few years they've said, oh, there's no real inflation, Look at the price of a cooker. It's come down and down and down. Of course it's come down and down and down, because a cooker you used to buy 20 years ago would last for 20 years. One you buy nowadays will last for 3 years. That's a massive inflation rate, concealed and hidden, and it's a huge waste of the Earth's natural resources, making this junk that's deliberately designed to break down and become obsolescent so that some other capitalist can make a lot more money selling you something which has to be replaced because the thing you bought in the first place wasn't fit for purpose and wasn't going to last. So we would set about changing all of those things. That's the long term, the big picture. Becoming more specifically, what do we do with the mess that we're in now? Well, first of all, it's not us, it's not nationalists, it's not ordinary people who've created this shambolic system which is destroying companies which appear to be sound. So taking, for instance, a building society. Building societies were created by ordinary people just trying to get their foot on the property ladder, people who hadn't inherited lots of money from their parents or whatever. So they created these institutions whereby everybody chipped in, everybody saved regularly, and then as long as you saved there for a while, then if you were a good bet, if you were a sound, safe person with a decent family, you'd been investing there for a bit, and you had enough money, and your house was worth more than you were going to pay for it, then you could take some of the money out that other people were putting in and buy your house. And then when it was their turn, they could do the same thing. It was a mutual self-help operation of an advanced sort of what John Salvage was talking about earlier. This is why all the earlier building societies, the ones just being wiped out now, like the Cheshire, the Bradford and Bingley, they were all based on local areas because they were built up by local people to help local people get houses for themselves and their kids. And then the Tories and the Labour governments demutualised them and allowed the capitalist sharks to come in and take them over. And now they're all being destroyed. But they say they're now worthless. This we do not understand. You can understand the company being worthless, but you look at the assets. They've got thousands of houses with people paying mortgages, which in effect is a rent. Every month, those worthless companies are still getting vast sums of money paid into them by ordinary Brits. But now, because those are collapsed, they're being hoovered up, all those assets, and the houses, and in fact the people in them, are being transferred, well, God knows where. The latest giant collapse in Britain last week, they're talking in terms of, I think the Spanish who bought the company up, Santander who bought it up, 614 million to buy the whole lot. It's got 21 billion in deposits. It's absolutely unbelievable. And then you've got all the houses, which theoretically are owned by the people living in them, but in fact a lot of the money is owed to the building society. So in fact it's effectively they're owned by the building society, and other companies are being allowed to come in and buy them at a fraction of their real worth, with the people who bought them, have the mortgage, sitting effectively as sitting tenants. What on earth is going on there? And the British government is merely coming in and buying the bad debts. What we would do is quite simply this. Those companies have collapsed, destroyed by the stupidity and the greed of their chief execs and the people at the top. So we would have those people out of their offices without a penny of compensation and without a penny pension, and all the obscene